Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the book of Exodus. Today we're going to be looking at Exodus chapters 17 through 20, and we are going to join God's people Israel as they are going through their wilderness journey, and they are led by Moses. So, starting in chapter 17, we have the people thirsty, and there is no evident water nearby. So, when the Israelites camp at Rephidim, we're just going to pronounce it that way. They are again short on water. Rephidim is today's Wadi Firan, the principal oasis in southern Sinai. It may be that the Israelites were prevented from getting to water by the Amalekites, but Moses feels that his life is in danger because the people are so angry with him. And so the Lord leads Moses to a rock at Horeb and tells him to strike it. Water gushes out as it does when the smooth surface of limestone is split. Moses may have been familiar with this extraordinary method of finding water, as he had been a shepherd for 40 years in a nearby region. So the place is given two names. Massa, meaning testing, because the people doubt whether the Lord is with them, and Meribah, which is quarreling, because the Israelites quarrel with Moses. In a similar episode, Moses is commanded simply to speak to the rock. In that event, he strikes it twice with his rod, and God's angry with him, and then that place is also going to be called Meribah, and that doesn't happen until Numbers chapter 20. And so we're getting ahead of ourselves there, but that one is actually going to get Moses in some pretty big trouble. But Moses here, he finds water here in the rock, and they are able to drink. They survive, and then they go on to defeat the Amalekites in battle. The Amalekites, they attack the Israelites, starting in verse 8. They're probably anxious to keep Rephidim for themselves. It is known by Arabs today as the Pearl of Sinai, a mini paradise of palm trees and pasture. At this point, we meet Joshua. He's later described as Moses' assistant. Here he is commanding a contingent fighting the Amalekites. The Israelites must learn to rely on God in battle, just as they have done for food and water. Moses prays from a vantage point overlooking the conflict, with Aaron and Hur either side to support his hands as they are raised in prayer. And so what happens here is pretty incredible, that when they fight these guys, as while Moses has his hands up, Israel prevails, and then when he puts them down, they begin to lose. And so what they do is Aaron and this other guy, they come up and they hold his hands up. Aaron and Hur, they come up and they hold up each hand. And so while his hands are held up, Israel won, and they won that battle. And so it's clear that because of this supernatural event of Moses holding his arms up and then winning, that it was coming from God and it wasn't from the military might of Israel. And so after that, Moses gets a visit from his father-in-law named Jethro. And so Jethro arrives with Moses' wife and his sons. He sees how overburdened Moses is with the care of so many people, and he offers him some sound advice on how to share the land. Jethro's principles of selection and delegation have never been surpassed and are valued and applied even to this day. So what Jethro did is he came in and he saw that Moses was trying to do everything himself, and what he was doing was just way too much work for just one person to do. So Jethro here, he actually gives us a pretty healthy model for ministry. It isn't good for one person to do everything, so he needed to delegate. How many people in a ministry or in many walks of life burn out because they're trying to do everything themselves? We need to trust other people and allow them to help for ministry to function optimally, but also other areas of our lives. One person cannot do everything. We need to be comfortable with people around us. We need to be willing to delegate and let others do things for us to help us so we can work together. And that's what Jethro told Moses. And it was sound advice that is good even to this day. So after that, the Israelites come to Mount Sinai. The Israelites, they arrive at the desert of Sinai and camp near God's holy mountain. Moses goes up to speak with God, and God gives him a solemn message for the people. Israel has been given her freedom to become a nation, and now they receive their calling to belong to God. They're singled out from all the nations of the world to be God's priests, his pure, distinct, holy representatives. The Israelites will represent God to the nations and bring the nations to God. God's reputation is to depend on Israel's example. And so here is a solemn moment. The people are to focus on God's holiness by washing their clothes and abstaining and setting themselves aside. So the Israelites are to devote themselves entirely to the task at hand, and even so, they must keep their distance from the holy mountain. The presence of God is awesome. The Lord descends on the mountain with fire. Smoke billows up. The landscape shudders. A ram's horn trumpet sounds a crescendo, and God speaks. It's tempting to think that Mount Sinai is an active volcano because of what I just described, but it may not be so. Most likely it's not. There are volcanoes to the east of the Gulf of Aqaba, but the traditional Mount Sinai is today's Gebel Mosa, one of 3 fine peaks near modern Rephidim. So it is not volcanic land. So anyway, Moses is up there speaking with God, and God is communicating directly to Moses. And so while God is talking to Moses, he gives him something that we see in verse 20, something very familiar, hopefully, to us all, the 10 Commandments. So the keystone of Israel's relationship with God is obedience. The people's commitment to God is to be shown by keeping his laws. The Lord reveals these laws to Moses, beginning with the 10 Commandments. They are firm, clear, and concise. Although several begin with the word "you shall not," their effect is very positive and liberating. In their simplicity and directness, they apply to everyone without exception for all time. So the first commandment deals with respect for God. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. You shall have no other God before me. So the Lord here is identified as the one who alone rescued people from Egypt. The Israelites are not to worship any other God. To take up another God is adultery, just as to take up another partner outside of marriage would be like adultery. The same thing goes for taking up another god. You shall not make for yourself an idol. The Israelites are not to make images of any god, nor even to attempt to portray the true one. Any carving or painting, however sincere, can only have the effect of shrinking the concept of God and misleading his worshippers. God is invisible. So we cannot make images of God. He tells us not to do that because whenever we're making an image of God, we are making him smaller than he is. It's not possible to convey what God really looks like because, for one, we don't know, and for two, God is so much greater than anything we could imagine. So he's telling them, do not create images, not of other gods and not even of me. He then says, you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. So don't take the Lord's name in vain. God's people are not to abuse or misuse God's name. They must not empty it of meaning by using it lightly or by taking vows which they then break. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy was the next one. The Sabbath every seventh day is to be kept for rest and enjoyment of God's blessing. It is to be a day of freedom and fresh perspective. And then the last commandments have to do with people's behavior towards each other. Every person's life is to be respected, and so are marriages, possessions, and reputations. Honor your father and your mother. Parents are to be honored. This is God's social structure, which will enable the nation to survive. The word honor means more than just respect for parents. It implies giving money or an allowance to provide for your parents even in their old age. Jesus rebukes some Pharisees later for breaking this commandment. They have set aside their money for religious use, and while they should be using it to maintain and take care of their parents. Thou shalt not murder. This is just 2 words in Hebrew meaning no killing. It means that there is to be no violent murder of a personal enemy. Later laws understand that death is sometimes accidental. The death penalty, as well as killing enemies in battle, are an accepted part of Jewish life. You shall not commit adultery. So a man is not to have relations with another man's wife. It is the worst kind of stealing, short of murder. And then the next one is thou shalt not steal. A person has a right to life, freedom, and property. These rights are respected and protected by the commandment not to steal. No disruption or no society can establish trust when theft and burglary are allowed. Terrible pain and disruption come from such crimes as kidnapping and slavery. Death itself even can result from the theft of someone's livelihood or savings. And so I do want to point out that Jesus did talk about the law, and it talked about how when Jesus came, did he change the law? Do these laws still apply to us? Yes, and Jesus teaches that obedience to God starts with our thoughts. And this is already at the heart of the law, as the 10th commandment shows, but Jesus makes it particularly clear. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says of murder, don't even nurse anger. On adultery, he says, don't even give her the look. Not talking about going through with it, don't even look, don't even come close. And so this is a fascinating glimpse of Jesus' own self-discovery and self-control, as well as being essential guidance for our own thoughts. So Jesus, he looked at the 10 commandments and said, I did not come to take these away and make up a different law. I came and I'm telling you the right way to really keep them. And so the next two commandments are, you shall not give false testament against your neighbor. This is again about stealing. This time the theft is of someone's reputation. With so many laws carrying the death penalty, a lie may cause a person to be executed for something that they didn't even do. Even gossip can be lethal and result in a living death for someone who can't prove the truth. And then the last one is, thou shalt not covet. God forbids jealousy of someone else's possessions, and this is a law against mental theft and a warning against being discontented. It is also a threshold commandment. To cross it may lead to breaking one of the other commandments as well. So God gives these commandments, and he gave them to Moses at Mount Sinai, and he made them pretty clear, honestly. Like the words that he used then and the words that are in our Bibles today, they're still effective and they're still important for us to follow today. Any good society any society that's not following these is not going to be a pleasant society to live in. And so God is giving these rules to his people so that they will be able to worship him and live in peace and harmony and live the life that he wants for them to live. And so that's all for today. I will see you guys back here tomorrow in the book of 2 Samuel.